Hey, what's up there? I'm going to make a recording in case you cannot make the class where we talk about this next assignment. This next assignment is an assignment using a 3D software, Tinkercad. So if you go into our files and then go into weeks 5 and 6, you will see the new assignment sheet here, 3D Tinkercad. Go ahead and click on that. And then reading through this really quickly, you'll see that for this project, we're going to use a 3D software called Tinkercad. It's usually a software used for 3D printing, etc. We're going to try to use it with the idea of how and what kind of sculpture would you create for a public space. Right, so trying to think outside of our normal bounds of size and proportion and scale, right? And then also you'll see here in the vocabulary is this word site specificity. Site specificity is the idea that the site of an object is necessary with regards to what that object means or that sculpture means. So you can imagine the meaning of a sculpture in an art gallery would be very different than the meaning of that object in your living room, right? So site having to do with meaning. Okay, so you're going to need a computer. You will use the software Tinkercad, which is online, and I'll show you how to get to that and how to use that. You're going to create, let's see, 3 sculptures, and then you're going to provide 3 screenshots of each of those sculptures. So you're going to turn in 9 total images for me. And then I do have some, I'm going to walk you through how I use Tinkercad, but there are a lot of videos on YouTube, so check these out. And you can actually get objects if you can find an STL. An STL is the file often used for 3D printing. But if you go to a place like some museums, even like I think the British Museum has these. I think if you just look up like STL files, and you'll find all kinds of crazy stuff that you can then import into Tinkercad if you wanted to use something else. So if you wanted like a horse, you could like find an STL of a horse and then bring it in. So, and this is a video showing you how to do that. I'm not going to show you how to do that today. And then the research is looking at some of these artists who make rather large sculpture or public sculpture. Really, the assignment is based around the work of this Ken Kelleher, and I'm going to go ahead and push this and see what happens. So you can see this artist actually makes digital sculpture. So these images that you see here, these are actually digital sculptures that he made, and then he photoshops into these spaces, right? So what I want you to do for this assignment is you're going to make the object, and then if you have the ability or the skills to then Photoshop it into a space, that would just be extra cool, especially thinking about your portfolio and going forward from this class, right? Obviously, when you see this software, we're not going to be able to make anything quite as complicated as this color-wise, but form-wise, you will be able to. So just keep in mind that these are digital sculptures that Ken Kelleher is making and then photoshopping into these spaces. Okay, let's go back into the files. So you can look through this. Leonard Dowart does the same thing, kind of, right? So I wanted you basically to be able to see that this idea of like digital sculpture is a thing that exists. So sculpture doesn't always have to be a thing you make in physical space, right? It can also be something you make in digital space. Okay, so do take a look at those. These are more, Richard Serra is more of a traditional sculptor, as is Ann Hamilton and Anish Kapoor. You guys probably all know Anish Kapoor for this really famous sculpture in Chicago. But just look at the form, think about the form as you're making your sculptures in Tinkercad. So that's the assignment. Okay, so 3 sculptures, 3 screenshots per sculpture, and I'll show you how I would do that. Okay, so let's jump to a new window here, and you're going to Google Tinkercad or whatever your search engine that you like, and then you should find this tinkercad.com. We're going to go into this. You will need to create you'll have to register, right? You'll have to create like a little, whatever it's called. guess, an account. And then on here, you'll just have to like pay attention and try to find your way around, but you'll see my recent designs. It'll actually save your designs for you. So I sometimes will like make objects and then 3D print them and then try to make them out of clay. But in this case, we don't have to worry about anything except, well, did you see that I pushed create new design there? So create new design, you're going to push create new design. And then this is the workspace, right? So you will want to work out your mouse or whatever you're using. If you're using an iPad, you'll want to figure out the commands or kind of the finger movements to move yourself around the work plane, right? I'm right now holding right click on my mouse and I'm able to move around. I'm also able to move in and out with, I have like this old school mouse and it has like a little ball mover thing on it. So I've seen some mouses have that. Anyway, so play around, figure out how to move yourself around the workspace, and then this is a very simple program. There's really only like 3 or 4 major commands that you're going to need to know to be able to make stuff on here, and that's what I like about it. But basically, it starts you out with these presets of shapes. So you can see there's a bunch of different shapes here, and I want you to play around with those. And then also in here, you'll see there's text and numbers, characters, connectors, so this program is used for all kinds of stuff. Shape generator, so there's just tons and tons of shapes in here. So I do want you playing around with those different shapes. But basically what you do is when you find a shape that you want, you are going to drag that shape out onto the workspace. So to do that, I just clicked on the object and drug it into the workspace. Okay, so once you have it in the workspace, you can see I can move all around it. I can see it from beneath. I can see it from the top. If you click, I believe over here on this little guy on the left, that can help you find exact spaces so you can really see what you're working on. So right now I have the object not activated. You can see it's just kind of sitting. When I want to activate the object, I click on the object. The commands that you get when you click on it, you can see are these little squares, these arrows. If you click on one of these little white squares, you're going to be able to change the shape of this thing. So all I'm doing here is holding, and you can change the shape. You can see that changes the shape though, but not the height, right? So that just gives us kind of our length and width. And then if you want to change the height, you're going to need to go with this box here. The arrows move the object around the workspace. Now you can also click on the object and move it around the workspace also. Okay, you can move in and out on the object. So that's how you can change the object's size. There is like a cheat sheet for Tinkercad, so you can Google Tinkercad shortcuts, and let's see what we have here. So here's the shortcuts. You could, if you wanted, save this image to your desktop or whatever, and this has all the shortcuts on it. So let's take a look at that. Well, it's outside of my, let's see if I drag this in, what happens. Oh, perfect. Okay, so the reason I opened this is if you want to make sure that an object is like on the ground or on the like workspace. Right now you can see my object is hovering above the workspace. So if you want to make sure that your object is on the workspace, I believe you just push G, but let's find it really quickly. Drop objects to work plane is D. So if I go back into my object and I push D, it drops. Now I'm imagining I have to have the object activated. So right now it's not activated. If I push D, nothing happens. As soon as I activate it and push D, then that takes it down to my workspace. So as I said, this is a really simple program, but you can actually make it complicated if you want. So for example, let's say you have an object and you want it to have, let's say I have this square and I want to have a hole in this rectangle or square, or whatever we're calling this thing. I'm going to click on the cylinder and drag it in. So now I have a cylinder, you can see. Let's change the shape of this, or the size of it, excuse me. Wow, cool. Okay, so you can see, especially with like a cylinder, I'm going to make that a little smaller, that got a little big. If I hold shift, it will not change the proportions. So I want to, let's see, I want to pull this up. Let's go below here. I want to make this thing a little longer, okay? And now, just really quickly, if you look, when I have this cylinder activated, you can see over here in the shape, this kind of gives you the information about that shape. So you can, if you want, change the color, okay? And then also you can change the shape kind of, and what I mean by that is if you look, it says sides 20, so you can actually make this thing, let's change the color because I feel like there's not very, you can't really see the detail there. But if you see these, like the way it's a hexagon right now or has square sides, it's not totally circular. If you change the number of sides, you can make it more circular or less circular if you like. There's also this thing called bevel, and that changes the top. And then segments, let's see what segments does. So segments changes the number of, I don't know, whatever we're calling those, like bevels, I guess, on the top of this thing. So you can see you have a lot of, boy, that looks cool. You have a lot of power to change these. Let's see if the square had anything like that. So the square does too. You can see the square has radius. Whoa, cool. Steps, and you can hear by my reaction. I have used this program actually pretty often, but I don't, as with anything, knowing the whole program is not overly easy. Wow, this is very cool. I love how these shapes look when they have a large number of, I guess, steps is the word. Steps. They look so kind of beautiful. Huh? Anyway, to make a hole in this thing, which was what I was talking about originally, we are going to pull this object inside of this object. So you can see I just have it activated. I'm moving it around. You can move it anywhere in here that you want. And then what you do is you actually turn the object itself into what's called a hole. So you can see here, hole. So I'm going to select the object, and then I'm going to go to the hole, this hole, click. And now it shows my object not as a full object anymore, but kind of as a see-through situation. Okay, and then I'm going to hold shift to activate both objects at one time. So now I have both objects at one time activated. I have both this whole object and the square object. If you're not sure, just click off. You could probably drag over both of them, which I just did, and that activated both of them. Or you could click on one, hold shift, click on the other one. Okay, so now they're both activated. And then what you're going to do is you can go up here to this little button here, and this is group. Group is Control G. So if we push group, you'll see that it actually gets rid of the object that we were calling whole object, and it takes away the space where that object was, right? So maybe that's a little tricky to understand. I don't know. Let's pull a sphere in here, and let's enlarge it. Okay. Okay, so here's my sphere. So then let's pull the sphere over top of our red object. Let's see what that looks like. Let's pull it in here. So you can see the sphere is touching my red object, right? And then if I activate the sphere, go to hole, and then shift, activate the red object, and then I'm going to go to group them. What you'll see is it gets rid of the sphere, and then it takes away the space that the sphere was touching of this red object. So that's how you can create objects of your own, right? So you might think like, oh, I don't want a square, I want to make this other object. And then you'll see here too on our objects, looks like a little bit like a Klondike bar or something. A red one, obviously. So here also is if you want to change the radius of the object, or radius, I don't know, like the positioning, the degree, I guess, of where how this thing is sitting. It's going to be with these little arrows here. Okay, so you can always change how these objects are sitting, and then you can always back out and go in and whatever. Okay, so that's really the thing I would be using quite often, I think, to make kind of my own objects and how they're spaced. Now remember, if you want this thing to be sitting on the work plane, you could use this arrow, move it up. Actually, you might not even need to do that, and then we're going to do just D is the button, and that puts it directly onto the workspace, as you can see. And then if you mess up in any way, you can go Command Z. So let's just look on here really quickly. I'm looking for how to like step backwards. I just wanted to show you that it should be on here. Here's zoom in and zoom out, plus fit selected objects into view. So you can see there's a bunch of different ones on here, but undo actions, Control Z, excuse me. So let's go back to that. And then if I want to step back a few times, on a Mac it's, I don't think it's Control, I think it's Command. So you can see it takes us backwards. What I wanted to see is if I'm below the work plane and I activate the object and then push D, yeah, it's still, I did D and it still brought it up onto the work plane. Okay, so what I want you to do is play around with this and think about making what you would call a public sculpture. And then you're going to have to play around in here. There is this one called Scribble. This one, I just wanted to show you, this one was kind of cool. You can draw an object. I don't even know if it needs to be closed. Let's see, let's try a closed one first. And then it will create that object. Okay, let's see how to get out of here. Okay, oh, done is down here, sorry, done. Okay, so now it made that object for us. Right, so and then from here we can play with that object's shape again, just like we did. It doesn't look like it has many options over here for how to change it. You can see we can make objects if we want, specific ones. And then let's just try that really quickly with, and I'm just going to delete that object. I have it selected, I push delete. Let's go Scribble again. Let's try an object that isn't closed. So let's try that. And then let's go done again. Okay, so you can do that also. So as you can see, you can really create just about anything you want. So remember the black arrow, this arrow here will bring it up and down. And then this little square will enable you to move it. So one moves the object off the work plane or around the workspace. One changes the size of it. Okay. And again, if you want to erase an object, you just highlight that object or select that object and push delete, right? And that can work for whatever you create if you don't want those objects. And I would look around on here. There's really like tons of funny objects on here. And again, they have like a lot of like possibilities to be played with and messed with. And then the cool things that something like this brings up is the idea of making. Like it's hard to sometimes think of the digital space as a space of making, right? But it's just a different material in some ways. It's like it's not tape, right? But it is something. And then again, remember that you can work around, you can play on here to find different stuff. Like, I guess, so this is like, imagine these are parts that you could 3D print and then put together. You can see they have little joints. You could put together to create, I guess, a dinosaur. So this is a software that kids use sometimes. So there's all kinds. There's dinosaur, there's skeleton, whatever. And you're welcome to use any of these you want. Favorites. There is I'm trying to find one that I really like. So there's basic, text and numbers, characters, connectors. Let's try this shape generator. Let's go to all. And I think in this one there's a bunch of different stuff in here. Yeah, like check out these gears. These could be used for something, I guess. And again, don't feel like once you have the object that that's all you can do. I'm sure if we connect on this, we can change number of teeth, module. I don't even know what that means. Whoa, it's overtaking my screen. Pitch angle. What's this? Let's get in here a little closer. Must be like the pitch of the teeth. Anyway, I'm just getting lost in here now, but you should play around in here, right? And see what you can find, and see if there's anything that you're thinking is cool. And my suggestion would be, don't worry so much about like making a thing. In the past, students really get caught up in like making a flower, or which is fine. You have 3 sculptures you need to make. So if you want to make one that's a flower, and then make one that's abstract, and then one that's like a mixture, you can do that. But just don't worry so much about making a something. I would be more feeling the idea to just like get crazy, and play around, and that was kind of why I showed you originally this Ken Keller, because I think these objects are so interesting in that, I don't know, they're just a little bit weird, you don't really know what it is, and I think that weirdness has a certain amount of potential. Right, so do look through the sculptures that I linked you to, and that might give you some ideas. Like, some of these look really cool, and then, as I said, if you're willing to, if you have an understanding of how to use Photoshop and you want to put your object that you make into a space, I would be really excited, and I'll go ahead and, I'll give you extra points, basically, because I would think of that as extra work, right? Like, but don't feel like that's not part of the assignment. I can't assign that to you because I don't think everyone has Photoshop. But if you do have Photoshop, it might be something cool to try. And then, Ken Keller, he's obviously using a software that's a little bit more advanced than our software. So he's able to like create different colors and different effects. As you can see, this feels like metal or something. Anyway, so have fun with this. I really hope this one frees you up in some ways to get a little crazier, or think outside of maybe the size requirements that we often have. And I think it's great for us to start to use different materials, or quote unquote like materials. Okay, thanks very much, and see you later.